Hi, everyone. I'm meteorologist Royal Norman. This is Sonoran Sky, an Arizona Family First Alert podcast. And today the subject is one that we've been talking a lot about recently, climate change and how it impacts the monsoon and how it may not be your father's monsoon anymore. Pete Mangione's joining us. He's an expert on this topic, but the expert that we're going to be talking to is from Climate Central, Shel Winkley. And Shel, first of all, tell us a little bit about Climate Central. What is Climate Central and what does Climate Central do?
Sure. Yeah, we are a non-advocacy nonprofit. So our job basically is to deal with the science and the data around weather and climate change. And then what we do with that is we want to tell the stories, but specifically we want someone like you, Royal, to tell the story because you know your community best. So we work with journalists, we work with meteorologists, content creators, and we take all that hard stuff, crunching all that data, and we understand how our climate has warmed, the impacts that it's causing, and then we work with everybody across the country to tell those stories so we know what to do with that data and we know what to do next with that data especially.
Yeah, and I know one thing from our perspective, like the latest thing we used from you was you did a whole study of the cities across the United States and how much they're warming since 1970, and it turns out that Phoenix and Tucson are really warming an awful lot, though the interesting thing about your study was that Yuma and Flagstaff and Prescott and some smaller cities, yeah, there was warming, but it wasn't as much as it was in the big cities. So do you guys see that a lot where more of the bigger urban areas are seeing more of the heating, or I should say the climate change that we're getting?
Yeah, and this is one of those moments where people always say, when we talk about climate change, we're like, oh, but it's urban. It's, the urban heat island effect. And that is absolutely part of it, right? But you have to remember when we talk about climate change, we're talking about the human-induced changes that we have made as human beings, right? So the way that climate change has warmed our planet is by putting essentially a wool blanket over the earth, by burning coal, oil, methane gas, those heat-trapping carbon pollution. So when you look at urban heat island effect on top of that, it's kind of like the icing, right? So the cause of the warming is climate change. And then that other human part of it is building in the cities that we have, adding all of the concrete, the buildings, the cars that produce heat, the air conditioners that are keeping us cool on the inside that are also heating the outside. So yeah, when you talk about the bigger cities, there is going to be more warming associated just because of the changes we've done. We've taken away native vegetation, we've taken away native green spaces, and then we've put unnatural things there like concrete as well.
And hey, this is meteorologist Pete Mangione here. Do you find it challenging sometimes to strike that balance to say, hey, it can actually be both, some of the urban development and processes independent of that?
Yeah, and I think that's an important part of the conversation, which when you talk about climate change, like the conversation is important. That is a solution. Number one that we can do is just talk about it. I think when we hear from folks who say, no, it's the urbanization, right? That's what we do as human beings. We try to find all the reasons that something can't be before we can finally come down to the reason that's actually happening. So that's one of the big, we put out this report about the fastest warming cities, but we've also done extensive research and talked about how much warming urban heat island effect alone is adding on top of that warming. So it's important that we don't just talk about one part of the story, but we talk about it all. But again, the important part to remember here is that it's all human created. It's all things that we have changed that has made the places that we know and love and that we live hotter and in some cases not exactly the most friendly to walk out to.
Yeah, and by the way, Shel, Pete got here last year for our hottest summer on record.
I did.
Welcome to Arizona, Pete.
Exactly 1 year ago today. Today is my first anniversary.
Yeah, oh, congratulations. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we just...
So it's Pete's fault, is what you're saying.
That's what he's trying to say.
That's basically what we were saying. Pete, would you move to Tucson, please? Now, but it was weird because we have actually come off the last decade in Phoenix with very, very hot summers that continually seem to be increasing. And that trend of having the hottest summer isn't only Phoenix, Arizona. It's a lot of places that are seeing that. Is that correct?
Right. And, Phoenix especially, it has been interesting to look over the past couple of years just because, Phoenix, I would say between the cities in the West and the cities in the United States, Phoenix and also Reno, Nevada, like those are the two cities that you see the biggest changes. And a lot of what you hear is, oh, it's the desert. it's summertime. It's supposed to be hot, but you're blowing past records that were never seen. So, you say it's not your father's monsoon. It's also not your father's summertime anymore. It's not the summer that we used to enjoy, or, the reason that some people move to Phoenix. It's getting hotter, and in some cases it's getting unlivable. Summertime is a fast warming season. Actually, though, what's interesting, for as hot as summer is in Phoenix, it's actually the third. When you rank the seasons, right? You go from spring, summer, fall, and winter. Summer is actually the third fastest warming season for the city of Phoenix. The fastest warming season, which means the season you're getting less of, is actually the season of fall there in Phoenix. Yeah.
So that's changing everything.
In the past 50 to 55 years have actually warmed about 5.5 degrees. So what that means is that your summertime heat is eating into the beginning of fall, which then the fall-like weather kind of eats into the beginning of winter as well, which winter is just shy of about 3 degrees of warming there for Phoenix.
It's amazing what we're doing. So we're going to switch gears, talk about the monsoon. And first, we're going to get the monsoon perspective from Pete. What did you hear about the monsoon before you got here? What did you expect? And then what did you see last summer? I'm curious to see those expectations versus because what we saw was a little different, I think.
I mean, what we saw was way below normal. So, honestly, it was a little disappointing. I kind of expected, okay, we've got all these hot days, and then we're going to get this nice day of relief when the thunderstorms come crashing to the city and kind of cool things off. And what I mostly noticed is those thunderstorms built over the mountains and kind of fizzled into mostly dust, wind, and pretty much nothing as they approached the city. So I'd say my grade was a little disappointing for me. Yes.
Yeah, it was a pretty minimal monsoon. And Shel, your research and the research of others, not just Climate Central, as you say, you're almost kind of an aggregator of all this information and make it easy for folks like me to understand. But the monsoon is changing in Arizona, and it's going to continue to change, is it not?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point, right? So Climate Central does some of our own science, what we call attribution science, but a lot of the trend data that we pull together to create these stories and to kind of create the conversations, a lot of that comes from NOAA. So we're using a very good, reliable data set to understand how this is happening. So one thing that is important to remember when it comes to climate change is that a warmer atmosphere is a greedier atmosphere. What that means is that it can hold more moisture. That's just basic physics that we understand about how Earth works. So for every 1 degree Fahrenheit of warming, the atmosphere can hold up to about 4% more water vapor. That may not sound like a lot, but what that equates to is two things. One, drought, and especially, water is something that's very important there in the desert in the Southwest US. It's harder to get out of, and it's easier to fall into, because if the atmosphere can hold more moisture, then that means it can take more from the ground, and it can take more from vegetation when we're not seeing rain. And then we get into the time like monsoon season when we should see rainfall. And it's not happening as often. We're seeing that high pressure really just park itself and balloon even bigger than it used to over much of the southern US. But then when you do finally get one of those monsoon storms to come through, the potential is there for heavier rainfall. So we know that with climate change, rainfall intensities are becoming more extreme. In the city of Phoenix, they've increased over the past 50 years by about 8%. Again, maybe in your mind that doesn't sound like a lot, but what that means is that you're not seeing as much rainfall, but when you finally do, you have a chance for a bigger rain, much faster than our cities are capable of handling, and getting away from roads and infrastructure. And so what that means is maybe too much of a good thing, and that brings a higher flash flooding risk along with it.
And yeah, I find that interesting. Sometimes when we try to explain to people, the frequency of some of these heavy rainfall events might be increasing, but also drought could also be increasing at the same time. And sometimes I'll get pushback. Well, how can you say downpours are getting heavier, but there's going to be less rain with more drought? How do you strike that balance? Because I find that nuance very difficult to communicate.
Right. So one of the things I've learned over my years of being a meteorologist is, one, talk to farmers, because farmers are super in tune, farmers and gardeners, right? And what I've always learned is that it's not about rainfall. It's about timely rain, and it's about the amount of rain that can fall and then soak into the ground. So let's say you're in a drought. You get a big flooding rain that comes through, and everyone says, oh, we needed that. It caused some problems, but we really needed that rain. Two problems here. One, a lot of that rain, if it's falling too quickly and the ground is super hard, it's ready, but then it's also a lot of that's running off. It's going and it's moving away from the places that we want to keep it, away from getting into our reservoirs or into our water sources. And then two, let's say you had a big downpour, but then you don't see another one for another several weeks. So again, with this greedier atmosphere, any bit of rain that falls, it can now evaporate it back out of the soil. So it's not really having a chance to stay there and do beneficial things for us because of the fact of just how we've altered the atmosphere and altered the temperatures.
And so, yeah, again, that idea of I'm going to oversimplify it. It's not going to rain as many times, but when it does, it's going to be potentially severe. That's what we're talking about, right?
Correct. It's going to be severe. It's going to go anywhere from the potential to be nuisance flooding to the possibility of being, high scale flooding that could eventually be one of those stories where you see people sitting in the middle of water waiting to be rescued. Hopefully that's not you, right?
Yeah.
So we have these bigger potential for higher ticket rainfall events that aren't exactly beneficial to us, but are going to be highly detrimental for us.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's been reading about climate change, this is happening around the world, this kind of same scenario, is it not?
Correct. Yeah. And we can do, I mentioned attribution science. So we have the tools now, we have the computer models, we have the science to not only understand it, but to do it rapidly. So to move away from the desert Southwest for a second, if you were following the news, early April, we saw the historic and what was called generational floods in Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, portions of the Mississippi and Ohio river valleys. There's an organization called World Weather Attribution that very soon, right around the beginning of May here, they're going to be putting out a research report that lets us know, because we know that weather is one thing. We know that those rains would have happened. That front probably would have stalled. But what we can do is we can look at a world without carbon emissions, and we can look at a world with it, run it through several versions of these computer models, and then understand how much more rainfall was added because of climate change, because of human contributions. And that's just one example, right? We saw what happened with Hurricane Helene last year during hurricane season. We understand that hurricane would have happened. The predecessor rainfall event would have happened. But using attribution, we can now understand how much more higher likelihood and how much more rainfall was added because of climate change.
It's amazing. It's just amazing what you guys are doing. Now, I'm going to take us back to Arizona a little bit because of the heat, and we all are, well, as you know, one of our big problems here is that literally hundreds of people die every summer in Arizona, in Phoenix in particular, in Maricopa County, succumb to heat here. The heat that can be truly unbearable, and some nights, many nights, the temperature doesn't even fall below 90. Is that heat component of our summer monsoon going to get worse as well, as it seems to have been in the 30 or 40 years that I've been here?
Yeah, that's a trend. I think that's something that most people don't realize when it comes to climate change. Like, we understand the heat that's happening during the day because we're moving through it. We're trying to do we're just trying to live life. We're going to school, we're going to work. But when it comes to climate change, actually nighttime temperatures are warming twice as fast as daytime temperatures. And that's just, that's across the US and that's almost globally as well. Nighttime temperatures are very important because, especially when you deal with the heat of the summer, there in the desert, what the night is used for, that's what it used to be, right? It used to at least get a nice cooler summer night just because of the way that the air might be drier if you're not fully in monsoon. Your body needs that time to rest. It needs to recuperate from the day's heat, and it needs a chance to recover before it gets geared up to do it again. So these 90-degree nights that we've seen in Phoenix, and we've seen the records just pile up on that. It's not to say that it's going to happen every summer, but we know that the likelihood of them is becoming much higher. And we also know that a lot of those temperatures, especially the nighttime lows you felt last year, again, using attribution science, we know that most of those nights would have been virtually impossible without a fingerprint of climate change.
And I think that the 90-degree low temperature is a great example in that I think sometimes when you try to explain to people how things are gradually warming, and you use an example like, and I'm going to make this up, warming an average of 1 degree Celsius or 1 degree Fahrenheit over a year, sometimes I think people can get a little bit lost with that kind of example. But if you are using examples like, hey, the number of nights where the temperature does not dip below 90 will be increasing by X number of days, I feel like that's a lot more relatable to people to understand. Do you find that as well?
Correct. Yeah. It's really your experience, right? Because that's how we always say, like, the way people that experience climate change is through extreme weather, and temperatures are extreme weather. So a lot of that is either looking at it out your window or scrolling past it on your phone. I think, though, when it comes to again, when those nighttime temperatures, we're sleeping, and a lot of us have the benefit of air conditioning. So we don't realize that the air is keeping us cool and what's happening outside is not natural. But not everybody has that luxury. And that's where it really becomes dangerous for those that don't have the cooling ability for nighttime temperatures.
Yeah, and it is that recovery. And I was trying to look up the record. Really, yes, it was 35. So last year, besides the hottest ever summer, we had 35 consecutive days where the temperature didn't drop below 90 degrees, which was an incredibly long period, as you know, Pete. And I started joking, and it's a lot more than, it's not a joke. But when we get that first 100 low, I'm retiring. I'm just retiring. I'm just out, because it will happen someday. I believe our warmest low is 97 right now. One day, can you imagine this, Pete? We'll have a low of 100.
Yeah, please don't retire if that happens, because we need you here to help shoulder some of the weight if that happens.
It just seems like a number that we never even talked about in the 80s and 90s. And now all of a sudden, it could be a low of 100 degrees, which is really, really crazy. Shel,
that's a really good point. So I want to just to kind of help you out and put it in perspective. We've done analysis on warmer summer nights, right? So back in 1970, the average low temperature there in Phoenix was generally around 78 degrees, which I think we'd all agree is comfortable.
Yes.
Through 2022 was the last time we did this analysis. That's increased by almost 6 degrees. So at least back in 2022, this doesn't encompass the terrible summers you had in 23, 24, but that average low was now 84 degrees, which means that generally most of your summer nights are now leveling out in the mid 80s instead of the mid and upper 70s.
Yeah, and I will tell you one thing. We went out 2 summers ago with one of those IR detectors that can tell you what the temperature is and show you a scan of all the hot spots. And this is a true story. At 10 o'clock at night in our back parking lot, the asphalt was still radiating at 120 degrees. So it's not just the ambient temperature. It's all these surfaces that are so hot that stay hot.
Right. And that's that unnatural part, right? That's that urban heat island effect part that's adding on top of the climate change aspect, because the other warming aspect of our night times are the air conditioners that are still having to run almost at full speed all night long in order to keep us cool and safe in our homes.
Yeah, and they're pumping hot air out into the atmosphere all night long. Shel, we got to end with some good news. Tell us some good news about the climate for Arizona. What can we do anything about some of the stuff that's happening? What can we do on make a small part, a small difference? Tell us about that.
Yeah, let's do that, because we don't want to talk just all the bad things and think, well, there's nothing that can be done. So the first thing, and this is what we always say, everyone always asks, like, how do we get out of this? We have to find a way to switch the way that we're getting around, the way that we're producing energy, right? We have to stop the coal, oil, natural gas burning, and we have to find more clean sources of energy. The good news is that the state of Arizona between 2018 and 2024 has spent $31 billion in order to boost things like solar power and to boost the infrastructure, as well as using things like electric vehicles. So that is good news, right? You're working in the right direction there. Not everybody can put solar on their house, on their rooftop. Not everybody has the money to go out and buy an EV today. And that's okay. Again, communication and conversation is always solution number one. Talk to your family, talk to your neighbors, talk to your local representatives, go to a city council meeting and ask what can be done. I think the city of Phoenix is doing the project they put into place to add, I forget how many it is, but more trees, right? So adding that green canopy back into our cities, and especially native green canopy, the trees that are built for the heat, stopping some of that sunlight from radiating onto our concrete is going to be one of the best things that we can do in the near term in order to boost the health of our cities. But just for your garden, look around your house. You got a lot of concrete. Maybe you've got a lot of desertscaping there. What kind of natural plants can you put just in your neighborhood, in your garden, that might be able to cool down around your area? And the benefit of that is, one, you get a little bit of cooling relief at your home, but maybe your neighbor, as they're walking their dog or they're walking down the street on one of these not 110-degree summer days, they'd say like, oh, that looks really cool. I want to put that in my place too, right? So you have the chance to be a trendsetter, and to kind of boost what our neighborhoods look like. But again, these little actions add up. It may not seem like it as one human being on this very big earth that has a very big problem that we'll have to tackle on the very large scales. But that doesn't mean that your contributions are zero, and it doesn't mean that you don't have a chance to influence the next person to do something great, to make sure that our city of Phoenix is a livable city of Phoenix for the rest of our lifetime, and that it's something we're gifting to our next generations as well.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So when you hear, hey, there's just nothing we can do, we're beyond the point, there are still things we can do.
And that's a good thing. And
Yeah.
Shel, I appreciate you being here from Climate Central, Shel Winkley. But I can't let you go until I ask you about the wallpaper behind you, sir. Now, can I guess, or do you just want to tell me? Because it's so obscure, I wouldn't be able to guess.
No, let's let you guess.
I think it's from Pirates of the Caribbean, the character, one of them where it was Davy's Locker or whatever, and it was that ghoul guy that came up. Is that what it is?
Davy Jones. No, but you're the first person to say that. So actually, I was a former broadcast meteorologist. I'm actually in a closet right now. This is the closet I used during COVID where I broadcasted. So I needed something to cover the wall. This is actually called Hipster Octopus.
Oh,
and if I blend in, I kind of look the same.
Well, there you go. I like it. Yeah.
Don't count the legs. A lot of people are like, is there enough tentacles there? Don't let science in this regard for the wallpaper get in the way of a good wallpaper. But yeah, Hipster Octopus. You can Google that, and you can have it as well for your wherever you want to put it.
I think it'll look great right here, don't you think?
Let's bring that in to our background here.
Hipster Octopus. Shel, thank you very much for taking the time. Hey, we'd like to check back with you sometime, maybe middle, late summer, see how we're doing in the monsoon, whether it's raining and whether we're getting baked and whatnot, and sort of do an update. Would that be okay with you?
Please do. And if you have any questions or you want to look at the data, we've got plenty of it for the city of Phoenix, climatecentral.org.
Yes.
It's all there, and it's all usable, and it's all free for you.
Yes, folks, climatecentral.org, a great resource that I can understand.
Yes.
So everybody can understand. Shel, thank you for being with us, and thanks for being on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, and stay cool.
You got it, bud.
Thanks, Shel.